So these are these 8 criteria I mentioned. There are 10 total, but 2 are only applicable for individuals who argue extraordinary ability in the arts. If you argue extraordinary ability in business, science, or athletics, you're kind of operating with these 8 criteria. And if you have these things in your background, these professional achievements, you should give us information about them. We'll kind of prompt you to give us the right documents to prove them, to prove all these facts to the government that these achievements took place. And you'll have then a case for the government to approve. And we can we'll go now in detail, and I will shed some light how we prove certain criteria. The awards have to be national and international in scope. And an interesting illustration is that lots of folks, maybe you were a winner of some kind of Olympiad competition in math or science in high school. You traveled to Beijing to compete, or you had some scholastic achievement while in undergrad. Those will not count for this criteria, even though it was a big deal back then when you were a student, because those recognize your scholastic aptitude, your academic achievement, not necessarily professional achievement in your field. Of course, there are exceptions. If you were some grad student doing master program, PhD, you published research papers, you had some visual contributions in science back then as a grad student, a researcher, and you won some awards for that, we can talk about it, because it would be then awards for professional achievements, governmental grants, scholarships, competition, your research won, and those things. Overall, these have to be awards for professional achievements. We are talking about widely recognized awards, as you got on some Forbes 40 under 40 list. Your company got on some list of innovative companies in your home country. There are certainly all these Cloud, TV, Cody award competition through the US. You can try to nominate yourself or be nominated by third parties. Globee awards for achievements in business or technology. And it's interesting that for startup founders, we are usually able to successfully argue that VC funding, or even funding from experienced angel investors who do a due diligence on you as a startup founder in order to grant you this funding, we argue those as national international awards, because we argue that they're highly selective, that these investors do professional due diligence, they really give awards to certain people, they evaluate your background, your merits as a startup founder, therefore this should count. And in any case, the government has guidelines that even if they don't count it as national international awards, they count it as comparable evidence of achievement for achievements in entrepreneurship, because VC funding is truly highly prestigious and usually so to compete for it with other startup founders. And the fact that you got it, the government understands, brings value to your case. Internal company awards that you got some recognition, shout-outs from your management in your company, are not to be considered to be national international awards, but we ask you about them because we try to show this as evidence of your achievements and your usually critical role, success, contributions in your company. So we show it as evidence under another criteria, which I will talk about a bit later, which is a critical or leading role at organizations with a distinguished reputation.
Katya, I just want to mention there are some questions coming in Q&A, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, including for the questions that people submitted.
Yeah, we'll absolutely go over them kind of one by one. I think we reserved at least 40 minutes, 30 minutes for the questions. So yeah, we'll have a whole conversation to address these questions in the end of the webinar. So the second criteria is very important. And in my firm, especially because we work with entrepreneurs, startup founders, or scientists, or software developers who are highly skilled and highly talented, we tend to argue this criteria a lot and very often, because it really gives us a chance to explain significance of your professional contributions and your work to the US government. This criteria kind of has two parts, two legal issues to prove that you've created something new, novel, innovative. It has to be a regional contribution in your field, right? Meaning maybe you worked at Amazon and you created some novel software solution or novel technology, or you enhanced the well-known Amazon product in a significant way. And there was a big impact about it. Amazon did the public-facing press release, media outlets wrote about it, like the society recognized this as kind of big deal. So we are talking about second kind of legal issue here in this criteria. It has to be of major significance in your field. Meaning if it's some invention which even got patented, but it's on the shelf and there was no adoption, there was no commercializing, no one is using whatever you ever created, it's of no interest to the US government. They will not grant you this criteria. So our task when you work with you is usually, hey, can you please fill out this project organizational chart and talk about what you consider to be your tools you developed, companies you built, frameworks, new novel frameworks you introduced at your job, right? Can you describe business significance of this for your employer, for customers? Was there commercialization? Was there adoption by users? How many users of the thing you created? We're digging up all this data to present to the government, wide industry recognition, adoption, commercialization of what you created, right? Of course, if you're some kind of serial startup founder, we usually argue your business is your original contributions of major significance to the field. And if there was press about your company, again, you raised funding about your company, all of this goes into why it was a major significance to the field. We show testimonial letters where some well-known people in your field or experts or people in senior roles at some companies say, yes, we know about his business. That's a big deal in his home country. He's making waves, it's groundbreaking, it's innovative, and so on. So there are two aspects, novelty, innovation, and major adoption, commercialization, why it's helpful to the industry, who is benefiting from it. All these explanations we give to the US government for them to grant you these criteria. We're going to be asking you for metrics of impact recognition. And there are many examples of that. We work with a lot of software developers. And I'm always asking, hey, apart from your main job duties, have you contributed to open source? Have you published anything on GitHub? How many users you had there? Because if you do, and other developers actively, for example, downloading your software from GitHub or commenting on it, you get stars there on GitHub, it shows impact also in the field, that you are impacting the field of software development. You are impacting other professionals in the field. It's just one example of what can be original contribution. It can be many, many things. So we are trying kind of ask you questions to prompt you to share what you think might work under this criteria, and then we dig up some information and metrics from you about it. Sergey, you can move on to the next slide. This criteria we argue also very often. It's usually in your resume. It means you work either in a leading senior level role or critical essential role for well-known organizations. The good news is that many companies, we can make an argument, have a distinguished reputation as an organization, meaning don't think that, okay, unless I work for Google, Microsoft, Amazon, I cannot argue this criteria. Even if you work for your own startup and your startup got distinguished in some way, right? Again, through VC funding, press about it, some national level awards. The product is well-known product. Your startup is making waves. There is this traction for a startup, users, adoption, pilots. We can argue his startup has a distinguished reputation and he's leading there as a startup founder. We are asking for all this evidence here, emails, documents proving you led critical initiatives, projects at work. And I kind of will give a legal definition of what it means to be leading a critical. When we argue someone is leading, it means, okay, you're at the top of this organization. It doesn't have to be the whole organization. If it's a large company, it can be you're at the top of a department or a subdivision of this organization. So that's a good news. You can be, a team lead of some department of software developers in some company, and we can argue that role was leading in this particular organization, or you were essential critical for that particular organization as some kind of team lead. And critical, it means it can be any job title. It's not about the job title for critical. A critical role means a role where through your projects, through your job duties, you advance the organizational business goals, meaning you're absolutely critical, essential for this group where you work, for this department inside some company. Without you being there, they cannot achieve their goals, business goals, KPIs. You drive profitability for them. So we are digging up all this information from you. What was the impact of your project? Did you impact their bottom line as a company? Right? Did you land some key customers? Did you serve them well? Critical role is a bit easier to prove because the impact of work can be internal, right? How you advance the business goals. We don't need to talk here in contrast to original contributions. What was the industry-wide impact of your work, right? Its impact of work can be just very important for this particular employer. We don't need to show that, okay, some other people outside the organization know about this project, or there is an impact beyond your employer. Its kind of impact can be limited to your company where you work. Sergey, we can move on. This is the next criteria. This is, I prefer call it authorship, not to mix it with press about myself and my work criteria. So this is called, I've published scholarly articles in my field, right? I'm an author of published research papers. What's interesting is that depending on your field, the government would give you credit for articles you wrote which are not published, in classic science journals or conference proceedings. Meaning a definition of scholarly articles can be an article published in a professional major media or industry trade media outlet. Meaning if you strategically plan, right, how to enhance my profile, how to establish thought leadership in my field, you can start publishing articles in technology news outlets. You can start with, I don't know, DZone, even medium.com, even though for Medium they will say that's blogging and anyone can create an account. There is no peer review, so most likely will not count. But the fact that you are out there, you're blogging here, you're on this website, you're publishing articles on another site, you join maybe Forbes Technology Council as an expert, you can pay them for membership. They allow you to publish an article on Forbes. All those articles will matter if they're published in professional media outlets under your name. They will give you credit for published scholarly articles criteria. So of course, if you also argue extraordinary ability in science, computer science is preferable if you publish scholarly articles in computer science journals. You can join IEEE, for example, go to the industry events, conferences, try to present there. It's interesting that speaking engagements, opportunities, speaking at conferences, industry events, they do not fall under any of these 8 criteria here I'm talking about, but the government will give you credit for them. And we can argue them kind of in your background section or the final merit section of their case, because they still distinguish you as an expert in the field. If you're invited to speak, the industry events, conferences, even by some schools, you speak in front of grad students, because you're this accomplished professional in the field, that will add credit to your case. So this is the type of evidence we show the government to prove that you published articles. It can be a book chapter also. Then we show them copies of the actual articles. The book explained where they were published. Yeah, the next one is, Sergey, you jump back. Yeah, high remuneration. This is a fun criteria. It basically means I'm very cool at top of the field because they pay me so much money for my work, right? I earn a lot of money in my field. It's called high remuneration criteria. It's easy to prove for us. If it's truly the case that you're highly paid professional in your field, we always look where you're paid, right? It can be in your home country. You work there, you're highly paid professional in your home country, you're highly paid entrepreneur in your home country. We give them comparative salary data for your geographic location and for your country. We usually use some kind of local Ministry of Statistics data to show executives in Singapore on average are paid this. There are lots of reputable sources of comparative salary data, Glassdoor, PayScale. Indeed, the government accepts all their methodologies for comparative salary data. So we usually support our argument. We give official governmental statistics. If you've been working in the US, then we kind of use the same tools as though we're researching prevailing wage for your H-1B. Here we use Bureau of Labor Statistics. We use this OPLC search wage wizard for American governmental salary data. They're updated biannually, twice a year. And we can research that, for example, software developers right now in San Francisco or Orange County, right, in a specific metropolitan statistical area, on average, the market rate based on also their skill level, that there are 4 skill levels data in the US. So level 4, the highest, more skill level, they're paid, for example, right now nationally $208,000. So if you're beyond 208, and what's important to realize, I'm talking about total compensation package. I'm talking about gross pay in your W-2 usually, right? Which is your bonuses, even vested RSU, stock, base, everything. We argue everything to the government because there is all of these service pay scale Glassdoor. The respondents also report their total pay. They don't necessarily report their base. So we are talking about total compensation package. If it's more than 208, then you are, congratulations, you are more than top 10%, like you are top 90th percentile nationally in the US, and we can argue then high pay. We tend in my firm to argue high pay if you're top 10%, right, on a national level. We can also show them regional data if it's in your favor, right? It's usually not in your favor if you work in the Bay Area, New York, which are more highly paid than national, but it is in your favor if you're somewhere in Texas or North Carolina. Then usually we show, yes, he's highly paid in his town. And yeah, that's how we prove it. And it is what it is. And it's very hard for them to argue against it because we give them lots of sources of this comparative salary data. And for startup founders, it's a bit another story, because the good news is that American startup founders usually don't pay themselves high salaries. That's a very well-known fact. Investors don't want them to pay themselves high salaries. So for them, we argue that the market value of their vested equity, that's a lot of money, right? If they have some kind of formal valuation for their company, because they're fundraised, and we can argue, hey, based on their last round, their cap table, this individual's equity now is worth, I don't know, $4 million. The government takes it into account. Like we can say, oh, he's paying himself $60,000 per year, but plus all this equity, then it becomes a lot, and that really distinguishes him from other entrepreneurs whose company does not yet have formal valuation, right? Their equity is highly valuable, and they agree with this. Overall, they tend to grant high remuneration to successful startup funders whose company is worth a lot of money. We can move on, Sergey. This is a criteria which is press about your work. It has to be published in a certain media outlet. Local, regional newspapers, media outlets do not count. It has to be usually national circulation, so-called major media outlet. We argue traffic for online media to argue that they have wide coverage and national coverage. They are widely read publications. Or you can be also featured in some industry trade professional journal, which only professionals in your field read, right? Like they write some profile article about you, they feature you because you're this distinguished doctor, so in some doctor's magazine which only doctors read, they write about you. This will count as well. Our kind of threshold to advise you where these articles should appear about you, or what counts if you already have press about you, that the media outlet needs to have at least 100,000 views per month. This is kind of arbitrary. That's for people who plan strategically. Okay, maybe I should do PR campaign about myself. Maybe I should publish press about myself in the next year so that I qualify for B1A 1 year from now. Then keep into account the traffic matters. When you do research where to publish, or you work with PR companies and they can secure press about you, then you should instruct them that they should check traffic of these media outlets where they're going to publish press about you. And of course, your name also in some published book, chapter, all of this counts if these books are read by professionals in your field. If someone writes about you on blogs, or you create a personal website, write about you, they will not give you credit for this criteria, but I guess if lots of people blog about you, or especially they discuss your work in some kind of communities of other professionals and some websites like DZone, which are well known, then they will take it into account probably under the final merit section of your case. More or less, to summarize, anything which does not fall under the 8 criteria but still distinguishes you as a person who has a higher level of expertise than average, who's at the top of the field, we want to talk about it, right? Maybe it doesn't meet the strict requirements of the SEED criteria, but it's public speaking, or you're called to talk to students, or they use your expertise here and there for high-level consulting gigs. We can mention it also to the government for the sake of the full picture about you. This criteria, people argue also a lot because it's sometimes not so complicated if you are especially well connected in some entrepreneurial circles, ecosystem in your field, to try to judge some events in your field. This is so-called judging criteria. Overall, the definition of judging, and they use the dictionary plain language definition of all these terms, judging is when you evaluate work of other professionals in your field as a figure of authority in your field. So, for example, you're this accomplished startup founder. You want to present yourself as this top expert in technology entrepreneurship. I specialize in ad tech or biotech or whatever is your subfield of entrepreneurship. If, for example, other startup founders use you as a mentor or advisor to them, and then they can sign testimonial letters that you've been the advisor, mentor to their startup, you advise them go-to-market strategy on their product, you use your subject matter expertise in this field to advise them, that would be considered judging because you relate in work of other professionals in your field. So my point is, it doesn't necessarily have to be this rigorously structured, or I judge this particular startup competition or pitch, I'm on stage somewhere, I'm giving awards to candidates. Great if it is, great if you judge somewhere on stage, but it doesn't have to be, right? You can volunteer, sign up for some hackathon. There are tons of hackathons organized by universities all over the country. If you really use your subject matter expertise there to judge participants, we usually are able to successfully argue this for judging. You know, you can sign up to judge Stevie Cloud Awards. They're gonna select you, of course, to be a judge or not. They're gonna look at your background, which is the whole point. Yeah, the point of judging is to select you because you're this top expert to do the judging activity, as long as it's one of those events where you go through some selection process. As a judge, you're evaluated by the experts in the field to judge this activity, to do peer review of some scholarly paper, then this will qualify as judge. And the government is used that, of course, peer review is judging when you provide feedback on scholarly work of others in your field. This criteria is called membership in highly selective organizations that require outstanding level of professional achievement for you to admit you for membership, right? So it's not the regular membership. Regular membership does not necessarily show, right? If you have regular professional membership in IEEE or some American, Computer Society organization, something else, it doesn't show that you are top of the top in the field. But if you're some distinguished fellow somewhere, right, you joined at the fellowship level of membership. Or I was successfully able to argue when my client was the head of a Bay Area chapter of a WASP, which is a nonprofit for computer security professionals. There are quite a few professional organizations for folks who are in cybersecurity field, computer security, and he was active. He was the head of Bay Area chapter, so we argue he's senior level because he's head of a chapter. He organizes their conferences, the events, he's behind them, he is active in the organization. He got membership criteria also granted because we argued he's not regular level there, he's on the board, or he's head of a local chapter. And there are some groups and they have different level of memberships. I'm talking about, for example, British Computer Society. You can try to join the fellowship level, especially if you're a published author or you have these contributions in your field. So you'll go through a selection process and they might invite you or not. But it's worth sometimes trying to apply at this highest senior level of fellowship level membership because it might count then for us to argue you're top of the top in your field. There is EIT, for example, in the US. which is for electrical engineers. I think in IEEE senior membership, they made the decision does not count because it just requires 5 years of substantial work experience, but fellowship in IEEE will count. So it kind of depends on what's the level of membership, what organization it is. Is it a well-known organization, or it was created yesterday just for the sake of people using it for the repetition? So we'll have to evaluate what group it is to advise you whether it would make sense to join or not, or to advise you whether something in your background counts or not. So I wanted to chat about what are kind of the common mistakes, especially speaking about the evidence folks sometimes present to the government in support of their petitions. As I mentioned, blogs might play a role, but they will not fall under I've published proper scholarly articles just because they're published on some website where it's self-generated content, or they say it's promotional content, right? Like if, for example, I'll give you an example. We represent lots of folks who work at Amazon because we are here in Seattle, and they work in senior level software development roles, executive roles at Amazon. And they publish a lot on Amazon, internal, external Amazon company blog. It's, big portal with all kind of articles. So these articles will not count as the published scholarly articles. But if they wrote some kind of white paper and they managed to publish it somewhere beyond Amazon blog, certainly then this will count as their scholarly article. Will this be useful, though, overall for the case? Absolutely, because again, it shows thought leadership, it shows they're behind some product if they blogged about it at Amazon blog. It shows maybe they were critical for Amazon, so we're usually able to use all this blogging you do to prove actually other criteria like original contributions of major significance to the field or critical roles. A very common mistake with recommendation letters, they have to be very detailed to be credible. So the level of detail is important. We try to help our clients draft these letters because if they just bring these letters, sometimes we're not happy with the level of detail there because the letters kind of need to prove certain projects, talk about the metrics, certain criteria. And it's important also who issues you a letter. These people either have to have direct knowledge, right, of the facts there, impact of your project. So these are people who work with you at a certain company. Maybe your immediate supervisor, your skip level manager, executive of some company. The US government loves when executives of companies issue recommendation letters if they have a high job title. They just find them very credible, especially letters attesting to a critical role at the company where you worked. And we also like sometimes provide so-called independent expert opinion recommendation letters. These are people who just are experts in your field. They understand who's important, who's less important in your field. They understand why this usually are of major significance to the field of certain technology. In a highly technical field, where we cannot count on this officer have this required level of technical expertise to understand significance of your software, or your projects, your technologies you develop, your work, it's sometimes to your advantage if you get some high-level people in the field. They might be executives in some other companies, they might be people you follow on LinkedIn, they might be folks you meet at conferences, events, industry events in your field, and they then kind of write independent letters saying we're also experts in the field, we have all this background, we understand the major impact of work of this individual. This person certainly is an extraordinary ability person, so they endorse you in front of the US government, and their letters also have weight because they're usually impartial folks, not your relatives, not necessarily your peers, colleagues at work. So the government gives them credit if they issued by people who also have weight in your field. And there is a way also even to order professional expert opinion letter from some professor who is truly an expert in your field, and they charge some money for it, but they're going to evaluate your background and issue a professional expert opinion to the US government how you meet certain criteria and why you're an extraordinary ability person. And I want to warn that if you want to strategically, grow your career, work on certain things to hit these criteria, don't think you're going to be able to accomplish like in 1, 2, 3 months. Because frankly, if everything you show them you accomplished in 1, 2, 3 months before you applied, they're going to be very suspicious whether you're truly there or not, especially for EP1A, right? For EP1A, so-called final merits adjudication stage of the adjudication analysis more in my experience than for O1A, because for EP1A, very often I see that even they grant you credit for 3+ criteria, and they still don't want to approve you under the so-called final merits. Meaning this officer, after he gives you these check marks, 3+ are met, he has to holistically look at your background and ask himself a question: does this individual have sustained recognition acclaimed by other professions in the field? Has he been doing important things for a while? It's sometimes challenging if you're very young to shoot for EP1A, so a good strategy might be to try to secure H1B, then O1A, or O1A, then EP1A, so that you kind of work at this high level for some years, you're highly paid for some years, you do contributions for a while, for them say, okay, then at this point he's at the top. That's sustained acclaim. Sustained acclaim issue kind of important for them. So they're trying to evaluate your evidence through the lens of, okay, was all of this kind of cooked up, fabricated for the sake of him to petition in the last 1, 2, 3 months, or really, he truly was at this senior level roles for a while. He was truly highly paid for a while. He did, research already 5 years ago, not just 1 month ago. So EP1A especially might take time. I'm talking about folks who just kind of more in the middle of their career, or maybe starting their career, and they're thinking, okay, we are talented, should we just shoot right now? I certainly can evaluate the profile and suggest, yeah, you still have to wait, or okay, you might shoot right now. It's really individual, but overall, keep in mind that US government watching the dates of publication of your articles, when you did all these activities, trying to figure out you're truly at the top, or you're trying to present that you're at the top and maybe you just did it for the sake of petitioning.